Now here's someone you probably don't know. His name is Carter G Woodson, and he's known as the father of Black history. So I'm going to read you a story, and it's going to explain why we have Black History Month in February, how it got its start, and who that guy is. So let's get to it. So now that you've learned about 8 super awesome Black Americans that have created history in our country, we're going to talk about Carter G. Woodson, and you're going to learn more about who he is and why we call him the father of Black history. Before I get into the story, though, I want you to really make sure that you're paying attention to these things while I'm reading. Who is the story about? What types of problems did he face? And what do you think this story is mostly about? So at the end of this, you're going to be answering some questions. You might talk about the main idea. You might talk about what the characters wanted. Whatever your questions are, I want you to really make sure you're paying attention to what's happening in the story. Okay, let's get to reading. So the book that I'm going to be reading today is called Carter Reads the Newspaper. It was written by Deborah Hopkins and illustrated, or the pictures of it, were done by Don Tate. Before I start reading, I just want you to notice all of these people. So each one of them has done something to create history. Just like this guy. Each February, we celebrate Black History Month. It's a time to honor heroes like Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, and Martin Luther King Jr. But there's one hero we sometimes forget. Carter G. Woodson didn't help people escape from slavery, start a bus strike, or lead a movement of millions. Yet without him, we might not have Black History Month. This is his story. Carter was born on a small farm in Virginia in 1875, 10 years after the end of the Civil War. Carter's parents, James Henry and Anna Liza, were born into slavery, and Carter grew up hearing about their lives. The stories they told weren't part of any history book, but Carter kept them in his heart. James Henry had run away from his master to join the Union Army and fight for freedom. Times were hard, though. After the war, James Henry worked on the railroad, saving enough to buy a few acres of land. Most years, the crops brought in less than $100. So I really want you to think about that. $100 might sound like a lot to a second, third, or fourth grader right now, but $100 for your family for the whole year, it's not a lot of money. Anna Liza was unbelievably brave. When she was a girl, her master had decided to sell her mother. Anna Liza asked him to sell her instead. That way her mom wouldn't have to leave her other 5 children. But no one offered enough money for Anna Liza, so her master sold her mother and 2 little brothers instead. Anna Liza didn't see them again until after the Civil War. She never forgot the horror of standing on the auction block. So this is what they call the auction block. It's like a little stage where enslaved people would stand up on them, and then the people who wanted to buy them could walk around and look, and they'd ask questions like, is she strong enough? Is he tall enough? Will they talk back? Kind of things like that. So when Anna Liza was up there on the block, nobody offered her master enough money, and so he ended up selling her mom and 2 of her little brothers instead. Carter's parents struggled to feed and clothe 7 children, especially in the winter and early spring. Food was hard to find. Carter, the youngest, once said, "We would leave the table hungry to go to the woods and look for lemons and oranges." Many times, he had to jump into bed early on Saturday nights so his mom could wash his only pants and shirt for church the next day. Carter could only attend school 4 months each year. The rest of the time, he was needed to work on the farm. Learning didn't happen just at school. James Henry taught his children to stand up for themselves and to take pride in who they were. He gave Carter the courage to look anyone in the eye and say, "I am your equal." And though Carter's father couldn't read or write, he believed in being an informed citizen, meaning he believed in knowing as much as he could. So he asked Carter to read the newspaper to him. But newspapers weren't easy to come by. Sometimes Carter read from old ones that had been used to wrap up food or packages. Reading the newspaper gave Carter his first glimpse of the wider world. Carter longed to go to high school, but his family needed him to earn money. When he was 15, he hired himself out to nearby farms, working long hours under the hot sun. He also drove a trash wagon. Ugh. High school would have to wait. Carter's older brother Robert had found a good job in the coal mines of West Virginia. Carter decided to join him there. So coal mines are like these caves that people would go into to find a rock that we call coal. And coal is used to help to burn for energy and fuel, to help trains, to help people stay warm. So it was a super important and necessary thing that we needed. But mining was hard work, especially for a boy who wasn't even 17. And it was dangerous. Once a piece of rock came crashing down on Carter's head. He never forgot his time in the mines. Years later, Carter said, "I am a coal miner and I can take anything." In this hard place, Carter met a man named Oliver Jones. You'd have to look hard to find Oliver's name in a history book. But in that small camp in West Virginia, Oliver did something important. He changed one life, and that life changed many. Like Carter's father, Oliver Jones was in the Civil War, and he believed in education. As a soldier who had been fighting on the last day of the Civil War, Oliver had fought for freedom and equality. He was willing to do his part to make sure that people got what they needed, said Carter. Each evening after working the mines, Oliver threw open the doors of his little house to the other miners. He made his home a reading room, filling it with books by African American writers and with newspapers from all over the country. He sold ice cream and fruits, all at prices the men could afford. At first, Carter just went for the food, but that changed. Carter said when Oliver Jones found out that he could read, he soon engaged or asked him to inform him and his friends as to what was in the daily newspapers. Carter was happy to oblige, or to do just that. He liked reading the newspaper. Besides, he said later, I always enjoyed nice things to eat. Carter admired Oliver. He was a well-educated man, but he could not read nor write. Said Carter, he learned through others, and Carter began to learn in the same way. Carter had longed for school. Life at Oliver's tea room turned out to be school of a different kind. Whenever Oliver and the other miners had questions about something Carter read in the newspaper, it was Carter's job to research all the answers. If there was a question about money, politics, or a new law, it was up to Carter to find out all about it in his newspapers and explain it to his friends. Carter was inspired by Oliver and the circle of men who wanted to know all they could about freedom, equality, and knowledge. Men whose own life stories would never be in history books. And so Carter's own life work began to grow. His interest in understanding the past of his people went deeper and deeper. Carter worked in the mines for 3 years. When he was 20, he moved home to Virginia to start high school. He finished in just 2 years. Now, most people start high school when they're 15, and it takes them 4 years to finish. He started when he was 20 and finished in 2 years. After high school, Carter went on to college and became a teacher. He continued to study and work hard, and eventually went back to college for his master's degree when he was 33. Then, when Carter was 37, he earned a PhD in history from Harvard University, the second African American to do so. So that meant that Carter went to high school, then he went to college, then he went back to college, and then went back to college again. And he went to college at Harvard University, which is a really awesome school where a lot of really important people in our country went. But Carter was the first and only Black American whose parents had been slaves to get his PhD in history, which means there's no other person alive that can say their parents were slaves, but they got their PhD, which means that they went to school. Not just once, they didn't go to college. Not just twice, they didn't go to college. But they went to college 3 times. At Harvard, so the story goes, one of Carter's professors said that Black people do not have history. Carter remembered his father's pride and his mother's courage and Oliver's determination to learn. He remembered reading the newspaper, so he spoke up. "No people lack or go without a history," he said. The teacher challenged Carter to prove him wrong. For the rest of his life, Carter did just that. In 1926, he created Black History Week, which later became Black History Month. Carter chose the second week of February to mark the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. Today, our entire nation celebrates Black History Month, and we honor Dr. Carter G. Woodson as the father of Black history. But in 1926, Carter was alone with his new idea. He had to create a trail. So these are all more people that maybe you know or have learned about that created history. He had to spread the word at a time when there were no computers, no internet, no television, no TikToks, no YouTube. How was he supposed to do it? He sent out pamphlets about Black History Week to churches and schools and clubs, and of course, in the newspaper. The boy who began by reading the newspaper to others transformed the way that people thought about history. He fought for a history that was based on truth, a history that included everyone. Carter G. Woodson didn't just study history, he changed it, and we can too. Back again. I realized after I recorded all this video that I forgot to tell you the most important part. Now that you have finished reading the story and you've talked with your crewmates and your class and your teacher about the main idea or maybe what the character wanted in the story, what Carter G. Woodson did, the most important thing to remember is that Black history can be celebrated for longer than a month, right? So we can learn about all of these really cool people any time of the year. We can also learn about really awesome Latinx, so Mexican or Colombian, Brazilian, all of these different people and what they have done to change our country, just like we learn about awesome white inventors and presidents and other people who have created such a big change in our country and in our world. So I encourage you to keep learning about history and to keep celebrating the people that look like you or who look different, because everybody deserves it. Happy Black History Month.